And finally, a protester has damaged a portrait of Lord Balfour at Trinity College, Cambridge. This comes amid a wave of attacks on historical monuments and paintings. Has the university got something to answer for when it comes to this kind of attack? Charles Moore joins me now. Charles, thanks for joining Spectator TV. You write in your notebook for this week's magazine about the portrait of Lord Balfour in Trinity College at Cambridge being vandalized. What did you make of it?
Well, of course, we don't know for a fact who did it and why, but it would be reasonable to guess that it was political, and that the political motive would be anger at Balfour's 1917 declaration that a national home should be found for the Jewish people in Palestine. Could be other things, but I sort of think it's unlikely. It's very shocking. We've seen it with Just Stop Oil, that works of art are considered to be fair game to make these sort of points. It's also a sad issue for Trinity College, which is my college, because of course you hope to open up some of your treasures to the public, and it was on public display, and now that all becomes an issue, and you have security and all the rest of it. I also feel, I don't want to exaggerate this point, but I think Cambridge has got something to answer for in all of this, which is that it has for some time been encouraging all these doctrines about guilt over slavery, guilt over so-called colonialism. And if you fan that flame, which is highly ideological and not scholarly, you're bound to increase the fanaticism of some people on the subject, or at least give permission for that fanaticism. And so there's a sort of logic by which, if you're taking down or trying to take down statues, returning objects to African countries, sometimes without even quite know who's going to take them when you send them, doing legacies of slavery studies which are all designed to show how wicked you've been in the past, a certain type of mind, particularly a certain type of young mind, will think, well, why not go and slash the portrait of Balfour?
Well, Charles, you do mention in your piece that the Master of Trinity, Dame Sally Davis, came out and said that she was shocked. Should she be so shocked? Were you shocked?
She shouldn't be so surprised. There's a shock about what a bad thing it is, but it nevertheless perhaps not all that surprising that it happened. This is the climate which has been growing, and Cambridge, particularly under the previous Vice-Chancellor, has contributed to that climate.
As you say, they don't know exactly who did it, but a group named Palestine Action has taken credit for it, which speaks to the reasons behind why they went after this portrait, which you just mentioned. These groups will say, what else are we supposed to do? This is ultimately a non-violent form of protest. What do you make of that argument? That's
a preposterous argument. It's not an act of violence against a living human being, but it is, of course, a violent act, and I think it will be seen in law as that. You're destroying something. And it's a provocative act which is likely to encourage hatred, because what you're saying is, this is such a bad man that his representation should be destroyed. That's a very aggressive thing to say. It's also, by the way, quite extraordinary attitude to Balfour. I deliberately published in this piece the whole of the Balfour Declaration, apart from sort of salutations at the beginning and end, because I want people to see exactly what he said.
Well, we can pull it up on the screen here for our viewers.
It certainly had major consequences, which are very controversial, but he's saying there should be a national home for the Jewish people, as long as that's compatible with the existing rights of the existing inhabitants. So this is hardly a terrible colonial act or itself an act of aggression. It's an act of high policy which had many justifications and can be argued about, but there's no wickedness there.
This is one moment in a series of incidents where we've seen monuments and other portraits and paintings defaced. You know, something I always wonder, Charles, is put the ethics of this aside from a practical perspective. Is this really swaying hearts and minds? Do you think the public change their opinion about Israel or Palestine when these events occur?
I don't think it's popular, but I think it has a useful effect, which from their point of view, which you might call a terrorist effect. It frightens people. And it makes people think, gosh, these people, I don't agree with them, but they must be very sincere, we better give them something. And it also does what iconoclasts have done through the ages. The iconoclasts originally were the people who literally broke the icons in the Orthodox world in Byzantium, and they were expressing particularly a religious ideology against idolatry and that sort of thing, and the violence of their expression lent power to what they were trying to do, and that's what these people are trying to do. And of course, they're very media conscious and they're very social media conscious, so the image is it's sort of propaganda of the deed, and the deed is contrived with all that in mind. So I think one has to assume that from their extremely unpleasant point of view, it makes some sense, and that's another reason for discouraging it, blocking it and punishing it, rather than indulging it and conceding to it.
Charles, something I picked up in the notebook is that you write about your own time when you were a student in Cambridge looking at this portrait of Lord Balfour. Do you think that changes how you view the situation? It's a personal experience for you as well as a...
Well, I feel very sad that a college I know and love, that something like this has happened in a college I know and love. And I worry that that college and more particularly that the whole university is not very strong on these issues. And I also think of the future with personal anxiety, because I think, okay, well, if you can do it to Balfour, who I don't think anyone much would say that he was a extreme or wicked man.
No one is safe if you do it to him.
Yes, so, and people will then get an argument up against, for example, Trinity has a great many distinguished Jewish alumni. Many of whom, unbelievable numbers of whom actually, I mean, it's astonishing. I think Trinity has 34 Nobel Prize winners, which is sort of world record for any institution. I think even more than Harvard. And that's just one college. And a very significant number of them are Jews. You know, suppose these people set to work and find some Zionist remark that they don't like in, you know, some great scientist has been given the Nobel Prize. What happened? You know, are they going to attack those portraits? And so on. It's a very, very bad precedent. And I feel particularly strongly because it's so important that educational institutions, for which I'm a lucky beneficiary, encourage intellectual freedom, courteous debate, difference of view, and respect for the great achievements of men and women in the past. And
if you don't learn,
you know, in danger.
If you don't learn how to debate at university, where are you going to learn how to debate and how to speak with courtesy, as you say?
Yes, you'd almost say that debate in its larger sense, I don't just mean debates in a debating society, but the way you discuss what you're studying, for example, it's going right back to the ancient Greeks. It is how, or indeed ancient rabbis, it's how you arrive at the truth, or how you continue to strive for the truth. And so if you don't have it, you don't get near the truth at all.
Charles, can Cambridge steer a new course? Dare I ask, can universities in America, which I think are much more radical in some cases, can they steer a new course? Has too much been given to this kind of ideology? Can they pull it back?
I think they can, actually, relatively easily. I think, and indeed Cambridge has, because the previous Vice-Chancellor was defeated when he put forward a resolution about defining free speech, which said it should be free speech unless it's offensive to groups. And
that doesn't sound very free.
This was rejected by the senior members of the university who voted on it, on the grounds that you might intellectually be led to say something that might offend a group, or the members of the group might at least claim that they've been offended.
Or people might take things very personally. You simply can't know what's going to offend a lot of the time.
You cannot calculate free speech on, I mean, you should try to be polite, but you cannot calculate free speech on the basis of whether somebody's going to get frightfully upset about it. And that's a very important defeat for the previous Vice-Chancellor and the top echelon of the university. And it's had good consequences. And I think you just need a lot more of that. And also, which is not quite the same as a free speech argument, though it relates to it, they must stop treating their past as a source of shame, and they must treat their past in the way they would treat all academic subjects, which is in a scholarly way. So, of course, you should study the legacies of slavery at an ancient university, in the sense that it's very important what happened. And we need to know what happened, as we do with so many other subjects. and with all subjects really, and there need to be nothing concealed. But if you're looking into slavery just to sort of find bad people in the past and say how bad they were and start arguing for reparations or taking down their statues or all this type of thing, you are not pursuing an academic course. You're pursuing an ideological course. And also you're disrespecting the past, because the past is a different place. Mm-hmm. And as a historian, that's what I'm always trying to convey. That's the job of the historian, is to show that. And people need to understand it. It's part of understanding the world that you understand the past is a different place. And you can't just sort of slap your own judgments. Basically, if anybody in the past is tried by the standards of the present, they're always guilty. Mm-hmm. And that's what, because those standards were devised at a different time for different reasons and so on. So that really matters. I mean, this is really, really anti-intellectual, anti-academic, anti-freedom, highly intolerant, and particularly damaging for young minds, I think.
Charles, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.